Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Winning Digital Customers Show. I have a guest again today. It's our returning champion, Dan Willig, who is with us, I think it was a week before last, talking about some of the latest trends in UX and CX. And we got through last time on our show a few weeks ago talking about some trends in the web world of web applications. And today we've invited Dan back. We got a lot of positive feedback on Dan's comments, and we wanted to talk a little bit more about apps, mobile apps, because obviously there's some similarities, but of course, some important differences between what you need to think about from a UX perspective and CX on mobile apps versus web experiences. So today we're just going to pick Dan's brain. Dan, as I introduced him last time, but he is the head of the user experience practice at the digital transformation agency, which just by total unrelated coincidence is a company I founded in 2008. And Dan's been with us for a long time. I remember you got your 10-year award, and that was a few years ago at least.
Yeah.
And Dan worked with tons of like major Fortune 1000 type brands, working on their user experiences all the time. So he has the perspective of seeing what's going on in a lot of different industries. So always love to pick his brain because I know he thinks about this stuff all day long, every day. So welcome, Dan. So happy to have you back.
Hey, Howard. Great to see you. Yeah, really excited to pick up this conversation. So for those who missed the first part, essentially what we do pretty much every year at From is have the whole design team, both visual designers and kind of more in that UX space, come together and do some brainstorming and thinking about, all right, well, what are some of the trends that we've been reading about or seeing kind of bubble up over the past year? And what are things kind of looking ahead that we're anticipating being more thematic and things that we should really be paying attention to as the year progresses and trying to find ways to kind of incorporate into our work. So last time, yeah, we focused more on kind of like general and general web experiences. And today, I really just wanted to share kind of what some of those things that we've been talking about when it comes to applications, and what are different trends that we're seeing in this space that other services and application providers are rolling out and have been considering in some cases for the past few years, but things that we were seeing like picking up steam and really that seem like they're promising things to consider when thinking about ways to reinvigorate or whether it's launching a new application or reinvigorate the applications that you have and the types of services that you're offering. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into our first example. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is subscription-based services. And, this is something that obviously has been around for a really long time, back to the days of the paperboy and probably before. But we see a lot more people kind of getting into this game. And customers are really kind of primed to want to pay a little bit more for different types of services, whether it's just because they're loyal to a specific brand, whether that's a news source or a source of kind of entertainment and music. We've seen as over the years, as people have been cutting their cords to cable, they've been doing a lot more subscribing to media streaming. Of course, there's music streaming, and there's just so many players in this space. But as we'll see and we'll talk about, others are kind of getting into this as well. But some of the benefits of this is they're great revenue generators for businesses. It's a steady source of kind of income as it each month goes by, or whatever increment your service and subscription plan follows. You have people kind of re-upping each time to continue using that service. And, as I've mentioned, we're seeing it in a couple different spaces. But some of the benefits of doing that from the customer's perspective is, not only are you getting this great content or information or service, but you can also often get things at a discounted price. Particularly, if you buy into certain tiers, maybe you're buying like a 2-year plan or a 1-year plan, you can maybe get a discount. And for some of the service things, you get discounts on the service as part of those as well. So let's take a look at a couple different quick examples. So I've been talking a lot about these content applications, which are the more kind of obvious things. But what we've been seeing growth in is more in this area of service. And some examples might be productivity types of apps, like Todoist, Evernote, storage things. Of course, have been around a while, like Dropbox, Google Drive. People can use these cloud-based services. But one of the things I've noticed a lot recently is things like food delivery services have started to really embrace and kind of run with these subscription-based models where I can be a subscriber. It kind of makes me loyal to that brand. And it means that, maybe I get special discounts on the orders. I might get special kind of white glove or preferential treatment as being a card-carrying member. So lots of fun advantages, both for the service provider and the recipient.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of physical, we saw a few years back things like these kind of like, it's kind of like the old fruit of the month club, but like the gift boxes, clothing that would come every month or every couple months, or different types of subscription services like that. And now I got actually advertised today a toilet paper subscription service. I was ordering, toilet paper with my groceries, and I got pushed an offer that, do I just want to, essentially have an automatic subscription based on the regular usage of it, so that I don't have to worry about ordering it, and of course, Amazon has been promoting this subscribe and save type models. And we see other companies like GNC that are in the business of selling something that is a consumable to say, hey, why don't you just get your protein powder on a subscription? If you tend to go through a big jug of it in 60 days, we'll just send you a new one every 60 days. We'll give you a discount to, like you say, Dan, to sign up for something like that. So in theory, this to me is consistent with one of the UX principles that I've heard you talk about on other occasions, which is this idea of disappearing UX. Like in theory, the very best UX is one where you don't do anything at all. What you need just magically appears. Well, if I can at one time tell it, hey, I use this protein powder, and every 2 months another jug of it just arrives. Imagine all the clicking, and you saved me. Now instead of one order with 3 clicks, I've just made an infinite number of orders. Although, of course, it creates the opposite, a different kind of customer experience problem when all of a sudden in your garage you've got 9 unused things of protein powder because you forgot to cancel the subscription. And now you've got all this stuff where you look at your credit card statement and you realize, oh my God, all these media subscriptions that I signed up to because I wanted to read one article, and I signed up for a free 30-day subscription, and now I've been paying for it for 4 months at $29.97 a month. And then that can be kind of a negative experience. I don't know if you have any thoughts about all that.
Well, as a parent, yes, I do. I'm looking more carefully when the kids are bringing me the iPad and asking me to put in my passcode, because we've signed up for a few subscription services unintentionally. But I mean, there's so, with all the media streaming, I always think, well, if I don't have to spend all this time ordering, reordering toilet paper and things that I need regularly anyway, it gives me more time to consume more media, which is, everybody wins.
Subscriptions beget more subscriptions.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're probably, there's probably different blogs out there of different kind of tips and tricks and, how to stay on top of it. But yeah, I mean, I think like you alluded to, I kind of tend to sign up for these things, forget about them. But when my trick is, once I remember, like I get that shipment and I'm like, oh no, like we need to slow this down. A lot of those services have things where you can postpone it another 6 months or something like that. So for me, like when you get that moment reminder, just act right away, and then, delay it a month or whatever you need to do. But that way.
Yeah, I want to highlight something that I think is an important UX or CX issue, really. And it's one of those examples where there's friction between what the business may feel is in their short-term best interest and what I think is best for the customer. Because I have several different types of subscriptions that I have to different things. And some of them will let you know, hey, this is renewing in a day or in 2 days. And what they're really doing is they're giving you the opportunity to say, oh, you know what? I actually don't need that anymore, so don't renew it. And then there are others that don't say a word, and then they say, here's your receipt. We've just renewed your subscription. Or if it's a physical fulfillment, like you described, the box just arrives in the mail and you're like, oh, I didn't want that. And of course, on the one hand, they make more money on the unintended reshipment or the unintended renewal or the undesired renewal. But of course, it's not great for that customer. If nothing else, you give the customer a negative experience. They might blame themselves and not blame you. But I often talk about this idea of blame pain and the fact that it doesn't matter as much as you think whether the customer blames you or blames themselves, because if they're having a negative emotional experience with their brand, that's bad for your long-term relationship, even if there's a part of them that thinks, oh, I'm stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I did that to myself. But then they still think, I'm too stupid to do business with this company because I'll keep making the same mistake again. I better not do it anymore. So I think that's something that companies really need to think about in this subscription area is, how much do they want to be that helpful? We only want to renew this if it's still something you really want, or how much do they want to hope for the gotcha of the breakage model, as they say, where the subscription renews and you're stuck with it?
Yeah, and that's some dark UX there, hoping for that breakage. But hey, it's worked for some folks. But I mean, I'm like you, I love when I get that email, 2 days in advance or whatever, that like, hey, this is coming due. That makes me want to be a loyal customer. That makes me feel confident. So like, oh, I'm going to keep going. Or, even if in those emails, sometimes they can give you an option like skip this month, that's great too.
Right.
But another thing though, there have been instances where I get the email after the fact. It's like, hey, we just charged you. And it's like, well, that would have been nice to know. So I reach out to them and say, hey, sorry, I haven't been using this. And, the really good companies will be like, you know what, I see you haven't. What I'm going to do is refund that amount to you. And, we'll see you soon. And that also gives me that good feeling and that loyalty. One example that this happened with somewhat recently was Audible. And I realized that I had been charged for 6 months and no one had listened to any books and in that time. And so I reached out to them and just said like, hey, sorry, I did not realize we were still signed up for this. So they were gracious and refunded that amount. So if people do accidentally step in it, give them some kind of path back because, now of course we're back on Audible again because, when people really wanted more audiobooks, I was like, well, they did such a great job last time. I trust them. Let's go back with that brand.
Agreed.
All right. So this is another kind of fun one. And, again, something that's been around for a while and people are playing with different ways to use this. But AR and VR immersion. So augmented reality and virtual reality, being able to just really harness the power of geolocation and your camera and give people an experience where we're augmenting reality, layering things on and highlighting, key areas or a path forward, or showing what a piece of furniture might look like in your living room before you purchase it, based on, all of the great things that you can use with these super powerful cameras that we all now have in our pockets. This is just something that I would say this has been on trend lists for probably like 8 years now. It feels like it's been a while, but people just keep thinking of new cool things to do with it. And, I think there's been a few false starts here and there, particularly with, some of the wearables like Google Glass. Sometimes things don't catch on right away. But I feel like with the mobile phone, this is really a powerful way to kind of give those sort of super users a really clear pathway forward, or give them that sense of confidence that in their purchase.
Yeah, certainly with Pokemon Go a few years ago, we saw how augmented reality can be so popular, where you could just hold your phone up anywhere and you could see the pretend Pokemon in the real environment, and it was a real novelty. I feel like, I'm curious what you think about this, Dan. I feel like with virtual reality, and just in case anyone's not clear, virtual reality is when you put on some sort of a headset, so you're sort of blocking out the world, and as you turn your head, you're actually moving the display, so you're trying to simulate being in an artificial world. I feel like that really hasn't caught on from a consumer perspective. For years and years, there have been different products that are virtual reality, including things like Google Cardboard, where all you have to do is slip your phone into it, or Samsung's Galaxy headset, I forget the exact name of that, which again is really just a plastic holder for your phone. And then obviously you have things like the Facebook bought, forget the name of the company now, but they bought the company that was also doing a lot of high. Yeah. And Oculus, thank you. Yeah. And even in my own home, where I have two sons who are pretty into gaming, the VR headsets, they have one for the I'm just going to sound like I'm spoiling my kid, but there's one for the PlayStation, and I think there's at least two of these headsets lying around my house. They never ever get used. They were just play with them for 5 minutes. Ooh, that's cool. Despite the fact that my kids are very often playing in some kind of immersive 3D world, things like Minecraft or Fortnite or Roblox. Yeah. So they're playing in 3D worlds, but they don't prefer to be in a simulated 3D environment other than as a quick novelty. They just look at the screen. So I don't know if we need to start rethinking the idea of virtual reality to include, if I'm immersed in a 3D world, because I got to say, it is immersive. My son is staring at that iMac in Roblox or Minecraft, and he is immersed, but he's not wearing a spatialized 3D, so I wonder, and the last thing I'd say about it is, in complete contrast to that, VR and AR, I think the biggest areas of applications we see them now are all industrial. And I don't know if you have more slides, huge industrial applications, job tools, in the military, they wear visors and they look at a tank and it analyzes and says, you need to replace this belt, and here's the part number. It's like they're trying to aid and assist people during, they both do that, both augmented and virtual. So a lot of that is really AR, but even for VR, things like flight simulation, things like that. So you see a lot of that in the industrial world to help with things like equipment maintenance. But in entertainment, it just doesn't seem to have taken off. So I don't know if you predict if it's one of those things where its time just hasn't come, or it's one of those things that, yeah, we tried it, it's just not that fun.
I every once in a while I'll read something about these kind of like innovative ways that people have used VR in like a medical school environment, practicing doing surgeries, and education as well, being able to really kind of visualize, quantum physics theories, things like that. Education seem to have a lot of potential when it comes to that VR experience. One thing I was wondering, during the whole shutdown was, were more people interested in VR at that point?
Because you had no normal reality.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did notice it on one of the sort of buy nothing kind of free neighborhood things here. I've noticed a couple VR headsets on there recently. So maybe now that things are opening up, people really don't want to be in that virtual environment. They really want to connect with others. So to be determined.
One of the things that occurred to me during COVID actually was, were we going to see Zoom for VR? Like, would it be the kind of thing where, you put your headset on and now you're in like an immersive conference room? But I feel like there's this fundamental problem with that, which is that if you look at most VR headsets today, they cover your whole eyes. So now if you have a camera on you and everybody in the room that you're joining virtually has headsets on their face, then you're just blocked and important. It's almost like you had the headsets and the mask. Now you can't see anything, So I don't know. I don't know how you get around that. If they had like a Google Glass that really wasn't too blocking of your facial expressions and yet gave you that experience. Maybe, I don't know, would I be like in my office and I'd turn around and it would look to me like, Dan, like you were sitting in the chair there kind of thing? Like,
Yeah.
don't you see that sort of thing on Star Trek, you know, when they talk to the Admiral or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or do we need it? Do we need it? Or is it just not really any better than just having good screens?
You know, one thing Skype released at some point during the pandemic is this way to kind of toggle on this view where it looks like you're all sort of sitting in an outdoor amphitheater or in a cafe together. And it's just this like goofy gimmick, but it's also kind of fun. It lightens the mood a bit, and does kind of have give you some feeling of closeness with the people that you're on with, because you're sharing this sort of novel experience. In somewhat of a similar way than to actually being in an environment, minus lots of other senses. Yeah, so I don't know, to be determined on the VR stuff, but I think the AR stuff is going to be fun to watch as more people break into that space. Engaging swiping experiences, and you know, one thing we work a lot in the travel space, and you know, car rental in particular. So when we saw this example, we thought this was some like really fun ways to use motion as something that was engaging and just really sort of adds that little bit of delight and kind of giddiness. You know, when you slide these vehicles and they, you know, their shocks are engaged and the wheels spin, like it makes you want to go deeper. It makes you want to keep exploring. So
now, Dan, if I swipe too hard, do they actually crash into each other and cause damage?
That's like the special level that you unlock.
That's the Easter egg, right?
But you know, and
then a Geico ad can come up, right? That's the
that's genius right there. But you know, even like the more sort of like skeuomorphic types of page turns and things like that. You know, we'll talk about that topic a little bit later, but you know, just little things like this are, you know, kind of add that little surprise and delight factor. You know, of course, the main thing about anything like this, if folks are out there looking to play around with some of these fun components, is just make sure they're lightweight, that they're not going to be buggy or slow things down, because then that just sort of defeats the purpose. But, you know, something kind of optimized to work well, you know, even if you're in an area with sort of poor connectivity, you know, that those are the types of moments that you just want to be able to click and have it happen without any of that sort of extra special sauce. So Neomorphism is this kind of term for the latest way that people are really kind of jumping into approaching UI, particularly with touchscreen interfaces. So let me just go back when iPhone first released, and you know, lots of its predecessors and competitors, they really kind of jumped onto this skeuomorphic trend. And you know, for anyone who's not familiar with that term, it's basically, you know, mimicking things in the physical world in this 2D environment. So you know, you would click on what looked like an old school address book for your contacts, and there would be like the spiral binding on the side, and it was really a way to sort of introduce these concepts of like, hey, remember you used to use this paper thing? This is where you're putting those people now. So it was this kind of like way to sort of transition people into thinking more about digital and really kind of embracing it. And you know, once that wasn't needed anymore, you know, people had started to adapt and sort of change their patterns. There was a real push against that, and that's when kind of flat design became all the rage, and everybody wanted to redesign their apps to embrace flat design, and really kind of simplify everything down to its bare bone components, and really make the content pop. Well, that was great, but what people started to realize in looking at studies was, some folks out there didn't know what was clickable or not, or things weren't kind of popping as much as they could. It lost that tactile feel, and it had an impact on engagement. So this is where neomorphism comes in. So this is kind of this blend of flat design, and taking those aspects of skeuomorphism that really kind of helps things feel tactile and that you can really kind of like interact with them, and it was kind of in this space, but without making it like excessively kitschy, by trying to say like, oh well, this has to look just like a piece of paper. No, it's just by using subtle effects like tasteful drop shadows to introduce the sense of kind of a 3D space. That can just give it kind of this tactile quality that people were missing, and really just sort of make the experience more engaging.
One example of that I always like is when there's things you can drag on a screen, and they put like those 3 little bars, kind of like if you were going to use your finger to drag, it would give you like a little bit of friction, which obviously it doesn't really. So it's just but it gives that clear indication with a very simple image. But it kind of connects your brain. Oh, that must be draggable because there's like a little thingy to help me drag it.
Yeah. It's and I think I really see it working. When we're doing user testing and we're adding those types of components, it sometimes I even wonder, like perhaps with not to be ageist, but with older participants that we end up with, like, are they going to know where they need to tap for things to be clickable? And I've been pleasantly surprised, that a lot of folks really do kind of intuitively understand how these different components work, and what's expected of them, and what they expect of the device and the interface.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about this, because some of what you're talking about sounds like it's the kind of continuing process of the UX community figuring out what works best. And that makes good sense. But it also sounds like there's an element of this that's a little bit of almost about fashion. It's about what's the look that is in style, what's the look that's kind of cool and hip at that given moment. And I'm wondering if you have a point of view on this, because, on the one hand, you could argue that apps are like clothing or anything else that's designed, and that people find appealing what they perceive to be the latest look, even if that's just something set by trendsetters, even if it's not really any better. It's just, this color is in this year pastels are in, or whatever, versus a mindset that says that great UX should be timeless, and that we shouldn't be too influenced by what, this season's cool look, and rather just be continuously moving for something that will work best for the user. So do you ever feel that there's a push-pull between those two things? And do you have any point of view on that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's like studying design history and looking at the way that pendulum swings, every decade or so, is fascinating. And, it always seems to be hitting like kind of similar notes on the up and down swing. But we become accustomed to, just thinking about the way we work. We become accustomed to the looks of things, and that can be good. It develops this sense of familiarity and kind of closeness with something. But when it's something that we don't necessarily have that emotional attachment to, and even when we do, a little bit of reinvention can kind of re-spark that sense of creativity and attachment to it. Now, of course, as anyone who's relaunched a website, done it like a massive redesign effort, or an app or anything like that knows, when you first launch something, you get a lot of complaints initially because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, did you see the new Facebook interface? They ruined it. It's terrible. But people get used to it within a week or so. And then they start to discover the things that are better about it. That sort of the lack of familiarity kind of freaks people out at first, but then they, become accustomed to it. And, the hope is that these redesign efforts are simplifying things. They're coming out of testing and streamlining and just paring back wherever you can. In addition to taking advantage of the latest and greatest technologies that are out there, or just understandings about the way things work and the way things use things, the way people use interfaces. So, for example, like that kebab interface, it's the 3 dots. It's an ellipse kind of turned on its side, and people call that the kebab. But 10 years ago, if you had put that in a lot of interfaces, people wouldn't really know what to make of it. But the affordance of that today is it's very easily recognizable. People know, like, that's something I'm supposed to interact with, and I'm going to get some kind of menu out of it. And as a result, it makes the path of least resistance much more clear. So when you're in there and you just need to get a task done, you can do it without very little sort of distraction, cognitive overload. But you have those things right there at your fingertip, those extra actions. So in a way, the way these kind of trends shift back and forth, it's introducing new things and new fashion, but with the purpose of trying to find new ways. Okay, based on where people's minds are at today, what are some new patterns, new conventions that are kind of a given that people expect to see, and how can we use those to make things better for them?
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I think we always have to be responding to our customers' needs. And if we think about how we want to be perceived by our customers that are using our apps or websites, whatever, we have to know that their filter is being constantly influenced by society, by culture, by other apps they use. And so I think you're right. If blue is the hip color, or if people are learning a new widget to use or whatever else, it doesn't mean we should jump on everything. But I think you're right. If our customer is changing, and even if they're being changed in an arbitrary way, meaning it's just the pendulum of fashion, it's not a greater march towards progress. But still, I think you're right. I think that because otherwise you wind up with things that someone says, well, that feels dated, and then that maybe doesn't convey the right message, even though the whole thing is a little bit silly and arbitrary. But you can argue that, or you can argue that, but we didn't make the fact that fashion changes over time. We can't change that, but we need to play within that world and know that it's influencing our customers' perceptions. So, yeah, great stuff. Well, I'm guessing we didn't get to everything, but each of these topics that you bring, Dan, is so interesting and deep that we could really do a whole half hour on any one of these topics, just subscriptions or just design patterns around things like skeuomorphism, neomorphism, things like that. So this has been great. I noticed that we are at the end of our scheduled time, so I think we better kind of wrap it up here for today, but just really, really interesting stuff. And thank you for bringing it. I always find it a lot to process and think about. And I'm so glad that you're sitting there. I spend a lot of my time all the time thinking about business strategy and things like that. And I'm always feel great knowing that you're spending particularly time looking at these detailed issues, because they make such a big difference. Whether it's things like subscriptions or literally how the interface should be and how we make sure that people can use it as simply and easily as possible. The language that we convey, is not only the words. The language we convey in an interface are things like this. Drop shadow is as much language, if you ask me, as words, because it tells you something that's information that maybe gives you an understanding of how it's meant to work. And in some cases, it's more elegant, because instead of having to put some instructions or whatever else, you could just use a great design to convey what people need to know. So, well, thanks as always for being here, Dan. This has been fantastic. And thanks to all of you for listening and watching. Dan, did you want to say anything? Any final closing words of wisdom?
Thanks a lot, and looking forward to coming back soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, everybody. And if you have any questions for Dan, feel free to put them in the comments. And if you're watching this in replay, you can still put them in the comments, and we will try to get to them anyway. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Talk to y'all soon. Bye. Bye.